Hi, everybody. Welcome to my homestead and welcome to my channel. My name is Jared. Today, I'm talking to Rabbi Pepperstone, and he is actually not in Israel. He is here in Wichita, which is a first for the channel. Pretty much everyone that I've spoken
Wichita.
to, yeah, representing Kansas. Um, and he now, okay, you're with the sorry, I have to look it up again. The Ahavath Achim congregation here in Wichita, and it's a conservative. You're part of conservative Judaism, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Which I will explain.
Okay. Yeah. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you, because all I've really been talking to you is just Orthodox. I haven't spoken to like any Haredim or Hasidim or anything like that. Just like basically Orthodox in Israel, and that's pretty much it. So first, let me just ask you: are you originally from Kansas, and did you grow up religious, or what's your story with being Jewish and being in Kansas?
So my story in brief. So I moved here 2.5 years ago. That's now almost 3. I moved here July of 2020. I moved here mid-pandemic because that is the time I was looking for a new pulpit position. I grew up in the Midwest, specifically St. Louis, Chicago, and Peoria. And then after 5th grade, my family moved to Los Angeles, California. I spent middle school, high school, and college in California. And then I went to seminary at the Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York City, which is the flagship conservative Jewish educational institution. Met my wife there. She's also ordained. She is a cantor, short version, a musical minister, and professional service leader. And we have served congregations and schools in Louisville, Kentucky, Cleveland, Ohio, Syracuse, New York, and now Wichita, Kansas, where we actually are both the co-clergy of our congregation. I did not grow up in a very religious household. So we were kind of like belonged to Reformed synagogues, kind of lived a secular life, did holiday stuff with both sides of the family, and always belonged to synagogue, loved the educational component, did happily had a very joyful bar mitzvah celebration, led the whole service, did really well. Did Jewish youth group in high school that was a little unconventional, wasn't part of like the mainstream youth organizations most synagogues are part of. Did a lot of weekend retreats in some of the Jewish summer camps near LA, and kind of came home from one of those very inspired and said, I want to be a rabbi. And my parents were like, what? And they're still kind of like, what? Been like 30 years since I mean, that was announced when I was in 9th grade, so 15.
And you said that they were more like Reform.
So we affiliated with Reform congregations. I can't say that they were actually theologically part of the Reform movement, but that's where we affiliated. And they were nice congregations. They had good friends. They still have many friends from those, and they were pleasant. My junior year of college, I spent in Israel. The summer at Haifa University, the rest of the year at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and basically came back from the year in Israel having left the Reform movement, and I wish it well. And reaffiliated with the conservative movement, which I knew very little about until college, quite frankly. And I was not really knowledgeable beyond my own 4 walls until college. That was a bit of a world expanding, eye-opening experience to the broader Jewish world, which was very good. I met people who were my age, who were engaged in more serious Jewish living, more traditional Jewish living, and found it very compelling, and sort of cast my lot with the conservative movement. Had a lot to learn. The year I applied to go to seminary, I took off 2 years post-college and applied to, at that time, there were 2 conservative seminaries, one on the West Coast at the University of Judaism, the Ziegler School of Rabbinics, and then JTS. I applied to both, did not get into the UJ in California, got into JTS, but kind of on theological probation. They go, you know why you're not Reform, you know why you're not Orthodox, you don't really know why you're conservative. So I go, fair. Fair enough. So I was on like a pre-rabbinic program where I had to reapply during my first year.
Mhm.
And I was the only person in that program who actually got in. So everybody else who was in the probationary program either just opted out or was rejected. So I'm lucky because I met my wife that year. And
Yeah.
what would I have done if it had gone the other way? We'll never know. But I got in. I was very happy to get in, and loved my time at JTS. And I guess that's a good segue to tell you a little bit more about conservative Judaism, because it's sort
Okay.
of like, what is this thing that compelled me? What do you know
Really
about
quick,
just
really quick. Let me just ask you.
sure,
I'm
please.
always curious. Is it really hard to go through seminary? Is it like, did you find it? Is it difficult, or is it intensive, or like what's it like? Just in summary.
It is 5 years of solid coursework plus internships and summer externships.
Okay.
So it really is like, and the programs are trying to streamline themselves now to improve the curriculum to be more adaptable to current needs. But basically, it's a 5-year program, and during the summers, you spend at working at either a Jewish summer camp or a Jewish organization, or leading a team tour either in the U.S. or in Israel, or Europe and Israel, or Spain and Israel. Working as a Jewish leader. Or doing hospital chaplaincy and getting a unit of CPE. A lot of different things we do during summers as part of our larger training as clergy and pastors.
Okay.
So I came in with really strong Hebrew skills, and I will say that coming in with very strong Hebrew skills made my life a lot easier. I have some colleagues whose Hebrew skills grew more over the time while they're at JTS, and I would say that it was harder. It definitely made things a little harder.
Do
So
they have like specific classes that are dedicated just to Hebrew when you're
yeah,
going
we
through the
actually took
seminary?
like Hebrew. We took like Hebrew until you are exempt from Hebrew language. So you have to actually pass out. You could come in and be exempt. You could be, your Hebrew is good enough. You're done. You still need to take like biblical grammar and biblical Hebrew and Aramaic and whatnot. But if your basic Hebrew was good enough, you could pass out of those. So I entered kind of in the middle of the Hebrew pack, and I finished Hebrew within. I probably took Hebrew for my first 3 years. In Israel, you take more Hebrew, but I came back and didn't take Hebrew for my last 2 years. But Hebrew definitely made things easier. Like I can read Hebrew, speak Hebrew, write in Hebrew, and it's I'm not fluent, I'm not Israeli at that level, but definitely very competent and can nowadays with an article I can read through a Hebrew article, but I have to look up words and
Yeah.
parse it out.
I know what
But I
that's
can
like,
translate
because
quickly.
I went on a mission to Spain for my church, and I realized that really to learn a language, you basically have to be like really immersed in it if you're going to remain fluent.
Yes.
Um, and since that time, I haven't really practiced it very much. It's now been a long time, and so I like understand it when I read
Yeah.
it and stuff and hear it, but it's harder to speak it.
Right.
But yeah,
Right.
so that's, and I'm actually trying to learn Hebrew a little bit. I'm using Duolingo, which I know will only take me like
Your
so
elephant
far.
ate my sandwich. Your moose is in my refrigerator. The most
I
useful
love
phrase.
bread.
Like, this soup tastes like a mouse. It's like they have the I think that Babbel probably has a better everyday Hebrew program going on
Yeah.
than Duolingo, which is more humorous, entertaining. You get the basics, you get the flow, word order, and how to read, and that's good. But they have some very silly sentences in Duolingo.
Yeah, for sure.
And the owl's cute. But it's good. It's a good start. I would say Babbel might be the next level for you.
Maybe I'll do that. We'll see how far I get. It's been
Yes.
fun so
Make the
far.
owl happy. Don't make the owl sad.
Okay, so you have like Hebrew, and do you think that you
Yeah.
could go to Israel and like kind of get along if you were just to speak just Hebrew?
Yes. They would probably speak English to me because they have no patience for my bad Hebrew. But that's okay. I would persist, and eventually they would give in, or not, and they would just then I have to give in. In Israel, a lot of English is spoken. There's a lot of like Anglo-Saxon English speakers, especially in the Jerusalem area and the Tel Aviv area. And English is learned by many, many students, and it's like one could get by in Israel with English just fine, but knowing Hebrew is always going to be better. And all the signs are in English too, everywhere. So it's not hard to get around.
Yeah.
Not hard to get around. Yeah. But it would be a push to make them speak Hebrew to me, because not a lot of patience for bad Hebrew. So
all right. So
that's all right.
So conservative and orthodox. That's
Yes.
primarily, I think, with what my audience is kind of interested in now. Like I think we kind of understand what's going on with like reform, reconstruction, and stuff like that. But
you do?
So well, somewhat. Like I mean, we have a basic understanding of like the three main like divisions, at least here in the US.
All right.
So with conservative, how did you end up going conservative? Why do other people do it? And then why not do Orthodox or Haredi or Hasidic and stuff like that?
So many reasons. Okay. So I grew up. So I want to give a little background to the conservative movement. I think it's illustrative of kind of what it is. So in Europe in the 1850s, like everyone's like, we're already asleep. In 1850s Europe, basically, modern Europe has given Jews of those Western European countries citizenship. And now they're no longer this people living in exile. They're now citizens of modern states. And there's a lot of responses to this situation. And a big one was assimilation. Basically, every Jewish movement in the modern period is trying to keep Jews from assimilating, to tell them you can be Jewish and French, Jewish and German, Jewish and whatever. You can do that. The Reform movement was the first expression of this, and Orthodoxy was a reaction to the Reform movement in Germany. But there's still a lot of hand wringing. And so one of the anxieties was expressed in, well, we're going to be gone in 2 generations. Let's catalog our work so that when we're gone, they will be able to see what we wrote. And this anxiety-induced scholarship led to a surprising excitement about Jewish scholarship. And it kind of reignited like that whole scientific study of Jewish texts, kind of a surprise move. And so in 1850, there was the Jewish Theological Seminary of Breslov, founded by Zachariah Frankel, a leading Jewish scholar of the day. And that kind of was like the center of like modern Jewish scholarship. And what emerged there, as they're like studying all these texts, kind of with like modern eyes, sometimes, and they kind of notice that Judaism has always undergone changes based on historical forces, internal and external. And it's a good thing. So it's called the positive historical school of Jewish scholarship, that it's always been this way. We've always been, receiving from the past, whatever was traditional, and then adapting and changing as the current situation called for.
Yeah.
And that's sort of been like the hallmark of the conservative movement, this awareness that we're not a static, religion, that it's this continuously evolving thing, and that is a good thing. One of the big differences, and this is within Orthodoxy, there's this, Orthodoxy doesn't even work. Around the year 1000, there is sort of like this emergent debate about, is Judaism trying to get back to the original revelation, or is it an evolving, ongoing thing? Like, what is it? Is it backward focused, or is it forward focused? Are the rabbis adding, or are they restoring? And that's a very interesting. I'm not even sure what they were doing consciously. There's a debate about whether the rabbis were consciously trying to restore what was lost, or trying to add things to make it livable. That is the view that I take, is that the rabbis knowingly, actively, happily, feeling authority to do so, take what they received and they innovate and evolve Judaism in their generation and then pass it to the next. And that goes on forever. It is this constant evolving thing.
Mm-hmm.
How much you evolve, what evolves, what can change, then you get diversity in the modern period. Reform says evolve in a certain way, conservative in a certain way, reconstructionist in a certain way, etc. How you evolve differs based on your denomination, but they're all kind of like, and even Orthodoxy to an extent, I can't speak for anybody really, there's a debate about how much to evolve and change.
What keeps the conservative movement like together? Because like, would it be like these two like seminaries, or because there's no like central leadership, right? Like
right,
how do you
right, and no movement has central leadership.
Yeah.
I mean, in the Hasidic world, yes, but there's no one Hasidic leader. What keeps, that's a very good question. I must tell more of the backstory. So that kind of chugs along in Europe. In the US, in the 1880s, they begin the first American seminary, Hebrew Union College in Cincinnati. And basically, they have a schism over how much to throw out of Jewish ritual. And some more staunch reformers say, we're going to get rid of a lot. And the more conservative element says, no, don't do that. And then they leave. So conservative is really conservative only when compared to the American reform movement. It does not mean what it means in the larger American discourse today.
Yeah.
It's actually a fairly socially progressive movement in many ways. So the term is not really useful. It has actually been a misleading term for some people, thinking they were getting a conservative American Jewish movement. I go, nope, that's not what it is. So, unfortunately.
So can I ask you some of the things like I'm wondering,
Sure.
what is the conservative view or approach to, like, for example, the Talmud and the Mishnah compared to Orthodox, like how closely you follow it, study it, implement it, stuff like that.
Orthodoxy would say that we ignore it. That is not correct. Mishnah and Talmud are core to rabbinic Judaism. They're like the two primary sources of halakha and of halakha deliberation. I studied Talmud regularly, and I'm teaching a Talmud class now, actually, on Sunday mornings. And all of rabbinic literature is important, and it has value. How closely we adhere to everything varies with mileage from rabbi to rabbi. And even within Orthodoxy, there's such a range of books out there that one could stick to or ignore. There's such a wide range. I would say, like, the conservative movement teaches normative rabbinic Judaism, involves taking halakha seriously to an extent. Not to the extent to which the Orthodox world takes it seriously, primarily because we also differ on how to understand halachic change, which is fine. That's totally. They have a view of halachic change. We have a view of halachic change. They say that, we're not halachic. We say that they're, stuck in the past, and
Yeah.
we're both right.
How about when it comes to, for example, returning to Israel? Because a lot of people have like a very spiritual experience, like they'll maybe travel through there, not really intending to stay, but then like something just kind of kicks in and they're like, you know what, I need to make aliyah and be here. In conservative Judaism, is there any emphasis put on that, like that you should try and return to Israel, or not so much?
There's not a big push on making aliyah. Certainly in the rabbis you spoke to who live in Israel, there is, because in particular religious Zionism, that is one of like the major focuses of modern Orthodox religious Zionism, for sure. There was a school I taught near in Cleveland called the Fuchs Mizrahi School, and a very fine religious Zionist Orthodox day school. And one of the issues they had was that they kept losing faculty because they kept making aliyah. I mean, which is good. And that's part of the school's agenda. I mean, they were really there to promote and encourage kids to make aliyah. And their faculty, voted with their feet, but they kept having turnover. So it was an educational challenge for the school. That is definitely uniquely them. I would say that the conservative movement is Zionist, that Israel plays like a central and crucial role in Jewish life and always will. But there's not a big push to make aliyah. People who come to me seeking conversion often have the desire to make Aliyah, and actually I often discourage them because I think that they don't have a realistic view of what it takes to make Aliyah. I think they have a very see it in the Bible kind of view, and often don't know what they're talking about. Some do, but some have, I think, delusions of grandeur that are not realistic. So
in regards to conversion, the rabbis that I've spoken to in Israel, they talk about how normally what they do is they'll discourage conversion because I guess the idea is that it's not really necessary for the nations as long as you're living the Noahide laws. That's what's expected of you. And then for Israel, it's a holy nation, and so they have extra duties, responsibilities, things that they need to do that benefits the world. Now, with you talking about conversion, is that the same view with conservative Judaism? Like, would you take the same approach and kind of like discourage conversion, or is it kind of different?
So I don't turn people away per se, but it certainly is a long process that I think if you're not serious, you're not going to stick with. And that's fine, right? There's nothing wrong with being a Gentile, a Noahide, whatever term one wants to use. There's nothing at all wrong with that. Nobody has to become Jewish. So I have no problem. If anything I says turn somebody off, I'm like, cool. They figured that out. Not a problem. Yeah, so I find that I need to help people understand who want to become Jewish that I'm a rabbinic Jew and not a biblical Jew, and that the oral Torah is more important than the written Torah, and that is a difficult educational hurdle to overcome because they're often very inspired by the Hebrew Bible and think that that's everything, but that's really just like the first two books on my shelf, as it were, or three books on my shelf. My shelf has many more books. My bookshelf has many more shelves with a lot of books that they have never encountered. So that certainly is an educational hurdle, but it's one that I'm very aware of now.
What about like with you know, expecting Mashiach? Like, how does it vary between the different denominations, sects? Like with Reform, for example, do they even like really expect it to happen? In conservative, do you expect that will be a real event?
So what is the it? The thing is that there is no it. There are several its. So the notion of what Messiah is varies. There's like at least there's various views on what it actually looks like. So what is the it you're referring to?
Well, I guess Mashiach ben David, the traditional.
So do you mean like a king and or supernatural or natural? Which one shall I discuss first?
How about supernatural?
No. No.
Okay,
no.
well, what
laws
about
of nature
then?
will not be suspended. The king of David is just a guy. And there'll be nothing will change about the laws of nature, the laws of humanity. People will be people, but it will just be a different political situation. So in that sense, I'm very Maimonidean, and I think I speak for my colleagues with some humility that is like by and far the vast majority of conservative rabbis and members of our congregations, that we do not have a supernatural notion of what Mashiach means. Maimonides, and his view is one that I agree with. Maimonides says all that it really means is Israel has political sovereignty in the land again, and we work our stuff out. It's a very rational socio-political version of what Messiah means. It's nothing messy, nothing woo-woo about it at all. So I tend to take that view, which is why some people think that. So if you think that the Mashiach is a supernatural thing, well, then the state of Israel is clearly like a lack of faith, because you didn't wait. You should have waited. God will do it. You shouldn't do it. If you have a more rational view of Mashiach, then no. And religious Zionists agree this is how God works, is through people. And this state does have religious value. Therefore, it is like redemptive, end of exile, or beginning of exile, or could be beginning of end of is the end of the exile, is the end of the exile, or it could be the end of the exile. How close it is varies with one's individual views.
Okay.
So I would say I tend to be more like the naturalist, socio-political view. I
Okay.
think it is possible. I think that it is to an extent happening. It certainly is. There is a state. There is Jewish autonomy. The state has issues. The exiles have been largely ingathered. Everyone could go if they wanted to tomorrow, more or less. So it's pretty remarkable that it happened. It does feel miraculous in a natural kind of way. It still is like that was unexpected. So yeah, but I don't personally hold the supernatural view. Nachmanides does, but Maimonides does not. I tend to be more Maimonidean in my orientation.
And for anybody watching, Maimonides, he was, my understanding, he was one of the Sephardic sages, right? He was, and he's sometimes called Rambam or Rambam.
He's called the Rambam. Yeah, he wrote the first major code of Jewish law in the 11th century, and he was like one of the major rabbinic figures in North Africa in his time period. And without Maimonides, I think that we might have lost a lot and be set further back by a couple centuries if he hadn't done his work. Yeah, he's a very influential, important figure, and he's certainly controversial within Jewish circles. I mean, he is he is controversial. I'm an admirer. I agree with him on some, but not all things.
Okay.
But he's a remarkable individual.
So as far as like the ingathering, so you could say that it's already happening because state of Israel, there's people all the time
because it happened
making Aliyah. It's happened.
It happened.
So,
yeah.
So you wouldn't attribute it to one particular person, right? Because you wouldn't be like,
so
well,
some people do talk about like a messianic age, where it's not a monarchy, but like monarchy as like a metaphor for Jewish autonomy and sovereignty.
Okay.
And I think that's a reasonable metaphorical leap to make. Some people are like, no, monarchy. I'm like, really? Because the rabbis did not like the monarchy. When the rabbis imagine what a Jewish state would look like, they imagine it run by a committee of philosophers. They do not imagine a monarchy. So I think that the rabbis, I think the Hebrew Bible and the rabbis are ambivalent about monarchies. Monarchies are solutions to problems that bring along with them their own problems. Kingship is difficult. Samuel made it very clear. The name Saul in Hebrew, actually, Shaul, means you asked for it.
Oh, it does?
Yeah, Shaul means asked for. So you want a king, you asked for it. And monarchies are difficult. They're expensive. They take a lot. They give a lot. They take a lot. They're very difficult. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry, don't mean to.
I think the rabbis share the ambivalence by when they envision in the Talmud what would a government look like. They do not imagine a monarchy. They imagine themselves in a council in charge, not a monarchy.
Okay.
So, interesting.
What about like the temple? One thing that I guess the Orthodox expect is that Mashiach would, in some kind of way, build the third temple. What is the view of conservatives in regards to the temple? Is it something that you expect to happen? Is it necessary? Just all that.
It depends who you ask. So this is something that's at the core of that. Is Judaism regressive or progressive? Like this is at the core of that very question. So, okay. Is the tabernacle plan A or plan B? Right, let's start there. So, did God say, build a tabernacle, and then golden calf, what are you doing? Good thing we have a tabernacle in place. So there is a view that the tabernacle is, and this is well rooted in scripture, the tabernacle is the capstone of creation. The biblical Hebrew language of the tabernacle's construction and the temple's construction are very clearly framing it as this is the capstone of creation. Very clear.
Okay.
So one view is tabernacle and temple were plan A from the very beginning. The whole point is to have a temple in Jerusalem, the plan A approach. That is one view. There's another view. The other view is golden calf. Oh, they need something more tangible. I'll give them a tabernacle. But really, we're just weaning ourselves off of human sacrifice into this animal sacrifice thing. And then when we're ready, we will move on to prayer. And then when we're ready, we'll move into meditation. That there is a progressive. So do you want temple or not? It depends on what you're on who you're asking. And this goes way back into the early rabbis. Rabbi Akiva basically was in the temple as plan A. Like we should always be working to having a third temple. Rabbi Yishmael, no. The whole point of the whole enterprise is to root out idolatry. The temple is a dangerous backwards temptation. It is a necessary temporary phase. And when it's gone, we will move into prayer, the higher level of divine service. And Maimonides shares that view as well, where he's like, and then we're going to move into meditation one day, right? So it depends which, and both views are present in the tradition, and they kind of like are competing for, attention. So anybody who says that there should be a third temple, generally agreed with Rabbi Akiva that is kind of like we're trying to return to our ancestral roots and the way things used to be. And versus the more progressive model that says, oh, no, it is an ongoing, evolving thing trying to get away from idolatry. And that's rooted in like early rabbinic literature. So both exist. Both threads exist and go way back. This is the prime book about that tension is by Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, Heavenly Torah. Gordon Tucker's translation is a great version of that. That he really lays that tension out beautifully. That is like the prime text for that dual thread going all the way through the tradition. So
within the conservative movement,
and
within the conservative movement, which one do you feel prevails more?
Oh no, we're done. It's progressive for sure.
Okay.
So the liturgy. So in the traditional liturgy, in what's called the Musaf service, which is on Shabbat and the holidays, which is a prayer that is in place of the special service offered on holidays. The verbiage is, one day we will once again offer to you in a rebuilt temple the following sacrifices, hoping for a restoration. So the restorative model. And that's traditional, and it has been for a long time. I would say then the mainstream view or the predominant view was the restorative model, even if individual rabbis held the progressive model. The conservative movement said, we really don't believe that. We don't want that. We're still kind of temple positive in the past, so we changed the verbs to the past tense. We once offered the following to you in the temple. There still is like the vestiges in our liturgy of temple restoration. They're kind of like, well, what does that even mean? I mean, Maimonides, I think, pictured like a vegetarian temple where there's no more sacrifices that are offered except for the grain, wine, and oil. I'm like, vegans could get behind that. So it's I say there's certainly like liturgical ambivalence, but definitely nobody that I know is actually like wanting to rebuild the third temple. That said, I find the Temple Institute utterly fascinating and mesmerizing. They're really interesting. Like their work is fascinating. I'm not going to give them any money, but I find their work intriguing and compelling and worthy of attention. I don't want there to be a third temple, but like fascinating,
Oh, they really want it.
I'm not really worried it's gonna happen. I'm kind of like, not like an oh honey thing, but like I'm not worried it's imminent either. Yeah. So I kind of like feel like I'm safe in admiring them because nothing will come of it, which is my hope/fear. So
okay. Well, with the progressive point of view, is there any more need or special function or purpose of Kohanim and
No,
Leviim at all?
no.
I know that they don't they give blessings. Sometimes they're invited to come up and give a blessing to the congregation.
There's three things that they do still that only, well, two that only a Kohen can do. So it depends where you are, how often this happens. If you're in Jerusalem daily, Israel weekly, in the rest of the world on the festivals, where the priests, well, if you know you're a Kohen, go up and what's called duchening, which is they basically utter the priestly blessing in their capacity as Aaron's descendants. That's one thing they do. The other thing that they do that is uniquely for a priest to do, or a Levite if you can't get a priest, is called Pidyon Haben, redemption of the firstborn sons, where the parents have to give 5 silver shekels to the priest to buy back their child, because firstborns were the original priests in the ancient Near East, and therefore all firstborns really belonged to the priesthood, and parents had to basically buy them out of their priesthood. So a Kohen is only one, or Levite, who could actually do that for the parents. So they do serve in that capacity. The third thing they do, it's not because they're priests, is there apparently used to be fights over the first 3 aliyot to the Torah on a Shabbat morning. Everyone's like, settle down, Kohen, Levi, Israel, we're done fighting, stop. And then they kind of like solve the problem because of, people arguing whoever got which aliyah. That's not a specifically priestly role. That was just, to maintain the social order, just to stop the fist fighting, as it were. But some we actually, in my congregation, we do have 2 Kohanim. One of them does, when he's there on the holidays, does duchening. He's not here often to do that. And in some synagogues, they do that still. But I would say in most conservative synagogues, they probably don't do it anymore. I'll say in Orthodox synagogues, any Kohanim definitely do it. It is like, I would be shocked if an Orthodox synagogue with a Kohen did not do it. I'd be very surprised. And Reform synagogues, I've never heard of a Reform synagogue doing that. That said, the priestly blessing plays a huge role in Jewish liturgy. We bless our kids with it on Friday nights. It is part of every service has it. In the morning has the priestly blessing as part of it, as a prelude to the last blessing. So it certainly is a big thing, but they're not necessary anymore. Should there be a third temple? I guess those who the priests who were lined up will be the ones who will be in charge. Those who are forgotten about will be forgotten about. But I'm not too worried about it.
Now, it's interesting because the first time talking about like congregations, you mentioned that your wife is the cantor of your synagogue. Yeah. I started watching some Jewish services. I think it was in 2021. I started getting interested in it, and I saw the cantor, and specifically, I watched primarily. There's a congregation in New York City called Park Avenue.
Park Avenue Synagogue. He's a phenomenal cantor.
Yeah, he is. He's amazing.
He's a very, very fine musician and a very fine cantor. Yeah. Watched him a few times too.
Yeah. That's a cool synagogue, and it's pretty too.
And Rabbi Cosgrove, he's a colleague. He's a wonderful colleague. I find his writing and his writing very engaging and very thought provoking.
Have you ever met him or talked to him?
Yeah, we were JTS together.
Oh wow.
Yeah, cool. We're not close. I mean, I think I'm very fond of him as a colleague. Yeah, we know each other. We'd say hi. We're not close. That's okay.
So with cantor, is there like a lot of like memorizing? Because everything that I've seen, there's a lot of singing, and it just seems like you'd have to memorize a lot of songs.
We basically chant and or sing our entire service. A lot is out loud. Some is done private mode. So one thing, and my wife certainly is a good guest to talk about Jewish music. So sometimes they're singing in, there are melodies that we use where everyone can sing along. There are also all European Jewish music is played in is set in what's called a nusach, and a nusach is a certain scale, certain melody fragments, or certain like motifs, certain intervals. And then certain melodies or written pieces. And so a lot of what they do is actually improvisation. It's actually akin to jazz. where, you know, sometimes if you're a jazz performer, you're playing in a certain scale, you will improvise, you know, on a certain piece. You may have memorized this other person's improvisation that you then perform like an improvisation, which is also what cantors do sometimes. And also might just kind of describe as playing with the band, just doing kind of the basic stuff. So cantors do a mix of all those things. It's improvisation, it's using certain motifs, it's using certain melodies, or a set piece people just kind of listen to, and or you kind of hum along with. Yeah, and every holiday has specific modes and melodies and motifs, and even certain times of day on Shabbat. How like Friday night's different than Saturday morning is different than Saturday afternoon. So each type of day is different, and certain pieces are special for like one time of year, and you could have, oh yes, that is this day, that time of day. Like this is the end of Yom Kippur. That's a very specific thing, like a once a year melody which you pull out once a year, and it makes it very special because it's very rare. So yeah, and then there's also chanting all of our sacred texts, which use cantillation, and Torah has cantillation, prophets have their own cantillation melodies, and then the 5 scrolls, Song of Songs, Ruth, and Kohelet, they all have one. Esther has its own set. Lamentations has its own melody, and those are the 5.
I guess you just kind of like
has its own melodies as well.
I guess you just kind of like over time as you grow up in Judaism, kind of like get accustomed to all that and kind of like get it all memorized.
Nope. If you went to synagogue all the time and were really paying attention and got involved in your synagogue reading and leading, you might. It is rare. It is rare. Being familiar with, possibly, be able to do is less likely. My wife went to cantorial school for 6 years, and both of us, there's always more to learn. There's always new music coming out, old music being rediscovered. You want to change it up to keep yourself interested. Always new stuff to learn, new stuff to bring in.
And is the cantorial school, because you said that you met your wife at seminary, right? Is it like together?
It is now. They used to be separate schools, and then they combined the schools several years ago to be under one leadership.
Now, when you're looking at like an Orthodox synagogue and a conservative one, is it set up the same? Like, do they have cantors? Do they have the ark in the back?
So all synagogues have an ark. I would say all synagogues. There is an ark where the Torah scrolls are kept. There's usually one or more podiums or stands where whoever's leading is leading, lay leader or cantor or rabbi, whoever's doing it. The seating varies. In Orthodox synagogues, the seating is generally separate, and separate can be done in a number of ways: side to side, back, front, floor, balcony, a mix. You never know. It's a whole wide range of how synagogues do that. Some synagogues were kind of like conservadox, had like a men on one side, women on the other, and then like a mix section in the middle. That's not an uncommon 20th century mix. Most conservative synagogues, it is open seating, sit wherever you want. And a lot of American synagogues, it's all kind of like, chairs or pews facing an ark at the front, and people lead from the front. There's a push against that now. We used to have everything happen in the middle. And then with the Protestantization of the synagogue, everything kind of got reshaped upon the Protestant model of a church. There's now a push back to bringing back the leader into the middle of the congregation. We've actually done that here. We used to lead from the front. We still read Torah from the front, but we actually got a small podium, put it kind of in the middle of the front of the seats, and asked everyone to kind of move in closer and down. My wife's innovation to kind of get this going, to get everyone sitting closer together so we can hear each other singing. And I think it's been great.
What does your congregation, what does Ahavath Achim mean?
Philadelphia. Brotherly
Philadelphia?
Love. Yeah, brotherly love.
Oh, okay.
Ahava is love. Achim is brethren. And so it's a brotherly love. Philadelphia.
Okay, neat. Well, and then to wrap this up, we're coming up on about an hour, but I have one last question.
Sure.
What's it like being Jewish in Kansas? Like, what, like, what's it? Is it different here than it is in other parts of the country? And
Yes,
what's been your
it is.
experience?
So it's we've lived in New York City. I lived in LA, San Diego, Cleveland, even Louisville, even Syracuse, where there's like, Louisville, 6,000 Jewish people, Syracuse, similar. I mean, there's maybe 200 households in Wichita in the area. It's just a much smaller community. So I definitely feel like I'm much more acutely aware of every single individual. And I think we're also more aware of each other. And there's a lot of like feeling of connectedness. Like we want to look out for each other even more than usual. And that happens a lot. We actually share space with the Reformed congregation, Congregation Emmanuel. So I now see my colleague Rabbi Davis regularly, and all of our members I see on a regular basis. So that's been really great. It just makes it even clearer how important having a Jewish community is, because for our kids, they've got a couple of Jewish friends in school, maybe. So where do they see their Jewish friends? At a synagogue thing, at a community event. And that's one thing. Just the community just becomes even more apparently important. So we definitely focus on just keeping things really vibrant and the right level of events and stuff going on. We just began with my wife's initiative a whole new like women's event effort to kind of get people together for all for walks, lunches, learning, whatever it is, just to get people together more. Kosher food, not a problem. You can get kosher food in any store in America. Most products are kosher. All produce is kosher. Many kinds of fish are kosher. A lot of packaged food already kosher. In terms of meat and cheese, Trader Joe's is the go-to for a lot of stuff. They carry kosher meat regularly. They have a number of kosher cheeses, and so does Dillon's. If people order them from out of town or go to Kansas City if they need really bigger supplies. And for Judaica in general, books or other holiday materials, you would probably order online anyway. There's no Jewish bookstore in town, no Judaic shops in town. The synagogues no longer offer like a sisterhood run gift shop. But online shopping makes that easier. So that's not really irreplaceable. That's actually kind of why synagogue shops have been in decline, because the internet makes it a lot easier to get a wider range of things that you could stock in one store.
And what about like interaction with like neighbors, non-Jews? Like, is there any difference here, like attitude toward Jews, or like is it just like pretty just normal? Or
what I've heard from a lot of people when we moved here is that their kids experienced a lot of missionary activity, especially from certain churches where it was like aggressively trying to get kids to join their church. My kids haven't experienced that. I don't know if that's because of luck of the draw or just different schools. But there's certainly what is the feeling that like, Christian missionaries have an eye out for anybody who's not part of a church, and that includes the Jewish kids. So we could put our kids, on alert, like, I didn't want to ask you, just politely decline and say, no, thanks, I'm Jewish, I'm good, and just kind of move along. And, then they do what they do. But it hasn't been an issue for our kids. But that is an issue that I've heard of.
But no anti-Semitism, bullying,
none that I'm aware of. None that I'm aware of. There are things that get said in schools, maybe like a really inappropriate Holocaust joke. Our federation does a lot of Holocaust education in local schools, to kind of like to, eradicate anti-Semitism as early as they can. And so that's a big part of what our federation does. The Mid-Kansas Jewish Federation, led by Julie Fruhoff and Kimmery Funchel. Actually, today they're in schools doing Holocaust education the whole day using a virtual reality program that they use to teach kids about, what actually happened and, why, hating other people can lead to, the worst possible results. And, there's a price to hate that is not worth it.
All right. Well, I think, that's a good note to end on. Hate is not worth it.
It's not worth it. Just love it. God wants us to love each other, not to hate each other.
Absolutely. And that's the spirit of my channel, why I reached out to you. My my church in particular, we really like Jews. We're different from other Christian churches, and so we just have a interest. And part of what I'm trying to do here is just to build bridges and get to know Jews better. And this was a first for me, learning more about the conservative movement. So it's been very enlightening. And so maybe we'll talk again sometime.
I would love to. There's
Okay.
The conservative movement certainly is, I think, a very interesting one, and there's a lot more to share about it. So if you're open to it, I'd love to come back.
Yeah, that would be great. Maybe we'll look into that in the future.
Wonderful.
In the meantime, everyone watching, if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe, like this video if you liked it, leave your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. Also make sure to share it, and I'll talk to you guys later.